All right, so get this right. Imagine AI that isn't just helping you code, but
Yeah.
like actually coding alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole idea behind Cursor,
Yeah.
this new AI-powered code editor that like everyone's talking about, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've seen code completion tools before, haven't we?
Right.
But Cursor takes it way further
Yes.
with these custom AI commands and stuff.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. So what do we actually mean by custom AI commands?
So basically, you can give Cursor direct instructions, almost like you're talking to another developer.
Okay.
So say you need to generate unit tests for a complex function,
Right.
and you don't want to write them all out yourself, which would take forever.
Yeah.
You can literally tell Cursor to just do it for you.
Whoa, hold on. Unit tests. Okay, now for those of us who haven't spent much time coding, could you break down what those are, like why a developer would actually need them?
Absolutely. So in simple terms, right, unit tests are basically like mini checkups
Right.
for your code. They run sort of different parts of your code in isolation
Right.
to make sure everything is actually working the way it's supposed to.
Okay, so it's all about catching those little bugs
Yeah, exactly.
before they become bigger problems.
Exactly that, yeah. And the beauty of Cursor is that it can automate a lot of that for you,
Right.
which is just a massive, massive time saver for developers.
So we're talking about like speeding up the coding process itself, but also making sure that the code that's being generated is higher quality.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
Exactly. It's a win-win. And it's not just about speed and quality either.
Okay.
Think about the actual mental load of coding.
Right.
Remembering syntax, juggling different libraries,
Yeah.
keeping track of all those little details. It's a lot to manage.
Yeah.
So Cursor aims to kind of take some of that cognitive load off your plate, as it were.
It's like having an extra brain
Yeah.
that's dedicated to like handling those nitty-gritty details.
Exactly.
So you can stay focused on the bigger picture of what you're actually building.
Precisely, yeah. And that's where those custom AI commands become even more powerful. So let's say, for example, you're working on a project that needs a binary search function in Python.
Now that rings a bell from my computer science classes.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, like off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly how to implement one.
And most developers don't. It's the kind of thing you might have to look up or piece together from memory. But with Cursor, you could just use the command. You could literally write, / implement a binary search function in Python.
Yeah.
And it would just generate the code for you.
Wow. Talk about a game changer.
Yeah.
That has to be a productivity boost,
They're
right?
huge.
But it also makes me wonder, so if we're relying on AI to generate code for us, how does that impact a developer's own learning and skill development?
That's a great question, and it's definitely something we'll delve into a bit later.
Mhm.
There's a balance to be struck between leveraging these powerful AI tools and making sure that developers aren't kind of losing their core coding knowledge at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost as if instead of memorizing like every line of code,
Right.
developers can start thinking more like architects, right?
Yeah.
So they're laying out the blueprint,
Mm-hmm.
and Cursor is helping them assemble all the building blocks.
That's a fantastic analogy. It highlights how AI tools like this really have the potential to shift how we even approach coding, you
Mhm.
know? But it's not just about generating code from scratch either, right?
Wow.
Cursor can be really helpful when you're working with existing code too,
Oh, yeah.
especially if it's something that maybe you didn't even write yourself.
Oh, tell me about it. Like, I've inherited my fair share of projects with code comments that were, well, let's just say less than helpful.
We've all been there, right? And that's another area where Cursor can really shine. So imagine you're looking at this chunk of code and you have no idea what it does.
Right.
With Cursor, you can just highlight that section and tell it to explain it to you.
Seriously.
Yeah,
It's like having like an on-demand code interpreter
exactly.
right there in your editor.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, that would have saved me countless hours
Right.
of head scratching and deciphering cryptic code.
For sure. And it can even help you to identify potential bugs
Okay.
and suggest fixes or workarounds for them. So it really is like having this second pair of expert eyes
Right.
on your code that can catch those subtle errors that you might have missed. And this debugging capability, I mean, that becomes even more crucial when you're dealing with larger, more complex projects, right?
Which kind of makes me think about the limitations of AI coding assistants. So, like, if we're talking about massive code bases
Yeah.
with, potentially thousands, tens of thousands of lines of code, can Cursor actually handle that level of complexity?
That's the question, isn't it? And while Cursor is impressive, like really impressive,
Right.
it's important to remember that even like the most advanced AI models, they still have their limits.
Okay.
And one of those limits is something called token size.
Token size. Okay. Now that sounds a little technical. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Yeah, so basically token size refers to how much information an AI model can actually process at once.
Okay.
So so think of it like the AI's short-term memory, and
Mhm.
just like our own short-term memory,
Right.
it has limits.
So if a code base is too large, it's almost like Cursor can only remember certain parts of it at any given time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It might not be able to kind of grasp the full context
Okay.
and the dependencies within a massive code base,
Right.
which could lead to, errors or unintended consequences.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like trying to understand a complex novel
Right.
by only reading a few sentences at a time.
Exactly.
You might get like the gist of it,
All right. Yeah.
but you're definitely going to miss some crucial details and connections.
Precisely. And this limitation really highlights a critical point when it comes to this whole AI-assisted coding thing.
It's not just about like blindly handing off tasks to the AI, right?
Right.
There's a real art to it, to knowing when to use Cursor's strengths and when to roll up our sleeves and really dig into the code ourselves.
Yeah, and you touched on something really important earlier, like how do we make sure that developers aren't becoming over-reliant on these tools, right?
Right.
It's like anything, it's a powerful tool and you've got to know how to use it.
So what are some practical strategies for walking that line? Like how do we make sure that developers are still learning and, growing their skills even when they're using AI assistants?
I think it's all about being intentional, right?
Right.
So instead of thinking about Cursor as like a crutch,
Right.
think of it more as a specialized tool in your coding tool belt, so to speak. Use it strategically for tasks where it excels, like we were talking about, generating repetitive code or helping you to understand a tricky piece of legacy code.
Right. So it's kind of like a carpenter wouldn't use a power saw for every single cut, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes you need the precision and control of like a handsaw.
Exactly.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
100%. Yeah. And just like that carpenter honing their skills, developers should always be learning, right? They
Mhm.
should always be expanding their knowledge base because this landscape is always changing and AI is part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how this might actually change the skills that are most valuable in a developer. So if AI can handle a lot of the more, I guess, rote tasks,
Yeah.
does that free up developers to focus on more of the higher level thinking,
Yep.
the problem solving, the creativity?
Absolutely. Yeah. The ability to think critically, to break down complex problems,
Hmm.
design elegant solutions. I mean, those skills are going to be even more essential in a world where AI is assisting us with coding, because it really becomes less about writing every single line of code yourself
Right.
and more about understanding the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
Orchestrating all these different components and really making sure that the AI is working with you, not, for you as if you're just a passenger.
Right. So it's not just about being like a code monkey. It's about becoming more like a code conductor.
Ooh,
Huh.
I like that.
Right. You're guiding the AI orchestra to kind of bring your vision to life.
And as the conductor, you need that deep understanding of music theory, composition, all the nuances of each instrument. And you might not play every note yourself,
Right.
but you're responsible for the final product.
That's such a great analogy. So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into Cursor and this whole world of AI-assisted coding, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember here is that AI is a tool. And like any tool, its impact really depends on us, on how we choose to use it. Tools like Cursor, they have the potential to completely revolutionize coding, make us more productive, more creative, and honestly free us from a lot of the tedious parts of software development. But it's up to us, the developers, to make sure that we're using these tools responsibly, ethically, and in a way that doesn't stifle human ingenuity, but rather pushes it forward.
Beautifully said. It really seems like we're on the cusp of a really exciting time in coding where AI can empower us to reach new heights of innovation. And just like with any new frontier, there are definitely challenges to navigate, questions to answer, and just a lot of learning to do. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.